Welcome to One-on-One. I'm your host, Lee Adams, and we have a special guest today, and we're going to be talking about healthcare and in particular transplantation, organ donation. And there's 103,000 people in the United States right now, generally speaking, on the organ transplant waiting list. They're sick. They're waiting for a donor to save their lives. 17 of those people approximately die every day because organs do not show up. So there's a shortage of organs. But today is a remarkable story of someone that met one of the real icons in Pittsburgh. Dr. Thomas Starzl is the legendary pioneer of liver transplantation, and he's, I would say, on the Mount Rushmore of Pittsburgh doctors, of Dr. Jonas Salk and Dr. Thomas Starzl are the two real legends in this city and what they've done to save the amount of lives that they have. So today we have a really special guest that was touched by Dr. Starzl in some amazing ways. Please let me introduce to you Mr. Thomas Burke. Thomas, it's great to have you today.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
You know, we in the first interview, we talked about, the beginnings of your story, but I kind of want to give a sum of some of that. I want to kind of sum up some of those things in case someone just watches this instead of the first one. So you grew up in, you were born in Alabama, you grew up in New Jersey, and you got sick and when you were in your mid-20s, right?
Yeah.
And what did the doctors say to you then? What did they say?
It took them, the doctors that figured out kind of what was wrong with me. I went through some various testing, and we understand that there's some reason that you're anemic, and they ultimately boiled it down to and figured out that I had a tumor on my liver. That tumor on my liver is a disease called fibrolamellar hepatocellular carcinoma, FHC. So it's a cancerous tumor. By and large, when the organization UNOS came about, put together sort of by Congress,
United Network of Organ Sharing,
they determined that people that had the disease I had, FHC, shouldn't be put on any list for organ transplantation because those patients are probably going to die anyway. Now, turns out that I'd had that disease and I'd received a liver transplant and thrived. Did probably better than anybody, any transplant patient ever in any hospital, in any situation in the United States. I don't think anybody has done necessarily better than me. I think that I've probably done better than 99.9% of those.
What a blessing.
Through sheer luck and great medical care. Now, I say that, but I tell other people that I've met that I hope they say the same thing. I want them to think that they've done better than any other transplant patient because there's really no reason that they can't.
And so the great strikes of luck for you started in New Jersey when they recognized that there was one person that could help you, and there was only one person in this country, and he happened to be in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So who did they send you to see?
Dr. Thomas Starzl, the pioneer, the father of organ transplantation. So I came, I met this man. He figured out the problem, figured out the solution to the problem being a liver transplant, performed the liver transplant less than 24 hours later, and that was 45 years ago, and I'm sitting here right now.
It's amazing. And for people that don't know, transplantation started, I believe, in the 50s, because I read Dr. Starzl's book, The Puzzle People. If you want to read a great book, The Puzzle People, you understand how brilliant this man was, but the beginnings of transplant surgery in this country and saving people's lives, they started in the 50s with kidneys, and kidneys are still the most transplanted organ by
Yeah.
far.
Yeah.
And they had some luck with identical twins, but mostly the people did not survive because when an organ is put into somebody else's body, the body just naturally knows it's not supposed to be there and it attacks that organ, and people do not survive. So that was the early goings, but you caught Dr. Starzl in the early 80s, and this is right when the pivotal moment in transplantation happened, and you had no idea you were there, but you were right at the beginning. And what was that pivotal medication that you took to help you survive? And you're here in 2026,
Yeah.
45 years later. So what was it, Thomas?
They put me on an experimental drug, what they called an experimental drug at the time. Experimental drug because the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration of the United States, had determined that we think that there's some evidence that this medication can help people undergoing liver transplantation. We're not approving it for anything else, but we're letting you, Dr. Starzl, who's been the foremost person in terms of doing research and experimentation on this drug, we're going to let you use it on your liver transplant recipients. So great. So they put a few other patients on it, and most of those patients had not survived. Dr. Starzl had transplanted a child, a 1-year-old, in May of 1981, performed a liver transplant on this child, and this child was doing extremely well, and he was on this new experimental medication. So I had my liver transplant, that I signed off on it, agreed to do the transplant, and agreed on this new experimental drug to treat. Great, thought nothing of it.
But you didn't really understand the gravity.
No.
You were in a highly experimental situation.
Highly experimental.
Nobody was surviving. Nobody.
No,
until
nobody.
This drug came along.
Until this drug.
And what number were you on that drug?
I was patient number 6 on that on cyclosporine.
Cyclosporine.
So the FDA, like I say, they had approved it and they were governing it. They were parsing it out to Dr. Starzl only. Dr. Starzl would in turn send it out to his patients that were on it. Unfortunately, the only patient that had survived to be on it before me was this child who had received his liver transplant a couple of months before me. So this child was on it and I was on it. I might have been discharged before this child because I told Dr. Starzl I really needed to get out of the hospital and go home to New Jersey because I was starting graduate school in the fall. I really needed to be home. For him, that was fine. I would be well taken care of. The doctor who had sent me to come to Pittsburgh to see Dr. Starzl in the first place would be taking care of me post-op. So, fine. You go home and we'll send you your medications. So that's how life was for me for the first 3 years after my transplant.
Where'd you go to grad school?
I went to grad school in New York City at a school, Pace University.
And what did you study?
I studied business and got an MBA.
Okay. And then you went to work where?
Went to work back on Wall Street, went to work for a small, initially an investment bank, broker-dealer, and then several years later went to work for a much larger one. So that's what I did.
How were you doing health-wise right after the surgery?
As far as I knew, I was fine because I wasn't told differently, so I was fine. I had gone home, given my medication, and continued life. I would keep in touch with Dr. Starzl's office. They would keep in touch with me. But basically, all was well.
So you stayed in touch with them doing blood work. Did you come back to Pittsburgh to see
I
him
came
at
back a couple of times. I came back about 6 weeks after my discharge. I came back, was here for basically a long weekend and a couple of days, a Monday and a Tuesday afterwards. They did some various checks and I went through had some various tests done. And then went back to New Jersey, continued on with graduate school at my semester break in January of 1982. So now we're about 6 months post-transplant. I went back for another checkup.
So how long did you stay in New Jersey after your transplant?
I was there for about 10 years, and then I moved to Pittsburgh.
And what was your thought process of moving to Pittsburgh?
While I experienced no health concerns at all, really, I just My career was kind of upset. The company that I was working for had been acquired by an even larger one. So I said, maybe just to be on the safe side, I'm going to go to Pittsburgh. I'm completely comfortable living there.
Were you single at the time?
Still single at the time. Said, if anything goes wrong with my health, I'll be there at the place that knows how to address my health. So I'll be fine. So in the back of my mind, it was always, Dr. Starzl's in Pittsburgh, I'll go to Pittsburgh. I don't have to go see Dr. Starzl every month or every year, but I need to see him when I need to see him. And in the back of my mind, that was like my security blanket.
Sure. Did you have a job?
I didn't have when I first moved here, I had interviewed and taken a job here. So yes, I came here with a job in hand.
What part of Pittsburgh did you move to?
I lived initially in the North Hills of Pittsburgh and started, life over again.
Where do you live now?
Right now I live in Squirrel Hill because when I moved here, I had a few friends, mostly in the medical community, the various nurses that I had met and the people on the medical team, on the organ transplantation team. And then as I started working and I met people and whatever, I eventually, a few months after I lived here, I met the woman who is now my wife.
Where'd you meet her?
I met her on a blind date.
A blind date?
A blind date.
They still do that.
Well, they still did that 35 years ago. So that's about how long I've known her. So we met and, I told her a little bit about my story. And in fact, when I first started talking to her before we even went on a date, we were talking on the phone and she said, well, she didn't know anything about organ transplantation. She knew about people that were sick with liver disease, and to her, that meant you probably had cirrhosis of the liver, so you were probably jaundiced. She said, so are you yellow? I said, no, I'm really not. I said, you wouldn't be able to tell that I'd had an organ transplant or any other kind of surgery.
The other thing people think about liver problems is they think you must be drinking too much.
You must be an alcoholic.
Yeah, an alcoholic. And that's just not the case,
and
right?
That's just not the case. In fact, patients now that have a liver transplant, and it turns out that about 18 months ago, my wife had a liver transplant. And they tell patients now that are recovering from a liver transplant, you can't drink. Well, after my liver transplant, I lost so much weight that one of the Dr. Starzl's chief associate, Dr. Iwatsky, came in my room one day. He says, we have to get you some weight on you. He said, I'll tell you what, I'll go buy you a 6-pack of beer. What kind of beer do you like? And I said, Dr. Iwatsky, the unfortunate thing is I don't drink. So no kind of beer that you buy, while I can appreciate getting the calories in me, I don't really like it. So it'll be a waste of your money. He said, oh, okay. And he was kind of disappointed because he really wanted to do something to help me out and gain weight. But be that as it may.
So I don't think there's many husband and wife liver transplant recipients, maybe in the world.
To my knowledge, we are the only couple where both, at least heterosexual couple, that both parties have had a liver transplant. There may be some gay men couples where both of them have experienced a liver transplant.
Okay.
But in terms of heterosexual couples, my understanding is we're the only ones.
How about that? How about that? And so you move to Pittsburgh, you go on a blind date, you meet this woman, she becomes your wife, and you, stay friends with Dr. Starzl? Was it like a friend relationship on top of a patient-doctor
It was on top of a patient relationship. I just had a great one-on-one relationship with Dr. Starzl. He, by far, was the most interesting human being I've ever met in my life. You could go and talk to Dr. Starzl about anything. Whether you want to talk about sports, great. You want to talk about movies, great. You want to talk about politics, great. You want to talk about music, great. You want to talk about literature, whatever subject you wanted to talk about, he would talk about that with you. And he would have an in-depth conversation. I mean, he knew something about any topic.
So besides being really super genius and having knowledge about a lot of different things, what was Dr. Starzl like as a man?
Like every other person on earth, I believe Dr. Starzl had his frailties. But there were certain things in Dr. Starzl that you could see. I could be in a conversation with him and I could look at him and I could see his brain spinning as he was thinking about things. And it was just the most interesting thing I had ever experienced in my life. Seeing him around other people and the way he would interact with other people, not just me, but anybody. And talking with them and the things that he would ask them. He would not ask people about facts. He would ask people about how you felt about those facts. What about those facts was insightful to you? And you could see him drawing information out, and it was almost like it was going from your brain into his.
So he would engage you.
Engaging in a different way than I'd ever experienced from another human being.
And he's written a book called The Puzzle People. Do you have the book, and
I
have you
have
read
the
the book? Yeah.
Yeah.
I have the book. He autographed my book.
Yep.
And I read the book, and it's interesting. I think he was born in Iowa, I
Yep.
believe, and he went to school there. And when he was in school, he did so well in school. I think he talked about a test that he took maybe around fifth grade, that it was very big test with tons of questions, and he got a perfect paper. And the teacher came to him and said, you had to be cheating, nobody gets a perfect paper. And then he went to high school and he wrote this beautifully written English paper, and he was also accused of it again.
Yeah.
The teacher was like, you could not possibly have written this
on your own.
Yeah.
Where did you copy this from? Surely to God.
So it just showed his brains were a superpower of his.
Yeah.
And so he decided to go into medicine and try to help save people's lives. And boy, did he. And so you end up meeting this man in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, coming from New Jersey, and you were born in Alabama. So now you find yourself in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and you have no idea that you have super genius as your doctor.
No.
And you have no idea at that time that transplant patients were not surviving. They just weren't. It was at the early days of transplantation where they were doing all these experiments and experimental drugs and trying different things. But you end up to be number 6 patient on cyclosporine. So just tell people what cyclosporine has meant to you.
Okay, cyclosporine was developed as an immunosuppressant. We're trying to keep your body from rejecting the thing Mother Nature wants it to do, is reject this foreign organ into your system. Mother Nature says you should reject that. It's like having a cold. You don't want a cold getting into your body and infecting you. You want to fight. Your body has a tendency to want to fight that cold off. Same thing. It would want to fight this organ off. Well, they had to develop medication to keep you from doing that, because the body's natural thing is if you weren't on any kind of immunosuppressant drug, you're going to die relatively quickly after having a new organ put in.
And you had no idea of that.
I had no idea of that. As far as I was concerned, all I knew about any organ transplantation was what I'd heard on the news. So I'd heard maybe this person in this city, I believe in Houston, Texas, there was a Dr. DeBakey, and he was doing heart transplants. So I'd heard about heart transplants. I'd heard about liver transplants. And those patients were undergoing these procedures and having them, but then I wouldn't hear anything more about them. So I didn't know that most of these patients were probably not surviving very long.
And Dr. Starzl didn't let on about that. He just acted like this was
He acted like it was the most normal thing in the world.
Yeah.
So because he was not the least, at least on the surface, to me, the patient, he didn't seem to be the least bit concerned. So if he's not concerned about it, and this is what he does for a living, he knows a lot more about it than I do. So if he's not concerned, I'm not concerned.
And it makes sense for him to be that way. Why would he put all that burden of
Right.
worry and
He wouldn't want
concern on
his
you?
patients to stress about it.
Yeah.
Now, as I found out later in ongoing years, he was A, very concerned about it, but B, he just had a way of not showing that, at least to the patients. The people on his staff and the people that he worked with, he would show that, and he would get upset if things went wrong during the course of surgery. He would never indicate to a patient that anything ever went wrong. Nothing was ever wrong. Everything was always
It's very positive.
hunky-dory.
Yeah.
And because he maintained that attitude, I developed that attitude.
And I think you need that
So
attitude.
we were he and I were kind of on the same plane.
And I think that kind of attitude helps you survive and helps you get through hard times.
Because you don't worry about things that ultimately you can't fix and you shouldn't worry about anyway. Because if there's any worrying, I always felt like the professional people, that this is what they do for a living, let them worry about it. They'll fix the problem.
Yeah. So when did you learn of the real gravity of this? I mean, at the beginning when you were transplanted, he's saying you're going to be fine, everything's good. But the truth of the matter is, not everything was fine. Not everything was good. Most people were dying of these transplants. Maybe some children were surviving for a certain period of time, but there was no adults surviving. And yet he's saying that, and you don't know that. So you're really naive to what's going on. And it really didn't harm you at all. But yet, when did you start to learn the gravity of what just happened to you?
I think when my mother asked Dr. Starzl in front of me and said, basically, she wanted to know, her child's undergone this thing, but how long is this going to be? Is this, like, he's fine now, but is he going to be fine in 6 months or in 6 years or how do I know, 6 weeks or, 60 years? And when Dr. Starzl told her that I would be bouncing my grandchildren on my knees, he had that much conviction and faith that it was going to be fine. So I therefore had that conviction and faith. In fact, what happened to me was I determined pretty much from that day on, whatever happens to me, I'm not going to have a problem, an issue due to this liver transplant. I'm going to be fine for that. I don't want this man to think that he wasted all this time and effort on me when I'm going to be perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And he told me that, so I believed it.
But there was a time, though, that I think it had to start to sink into you what you really just went through. When did that start?
I think as time went on, and within a couple of years, and I'm on my schedule, if you will. I'm taking all my medications. I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to do. I'm going and getting my blood work done, and I'm getting that blood work to Dr. Starzl's office. And I'm not hearing anything negative, that I'm not doing fine. But I also, by then, I'm kind of understanding that this is the way life is going to be from now on. The rest of my life, I'm going to be on this medication, and that's what's going to keep me alive. So I just accepted that fact and said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do all those little things that I need to do to make sure that they don't feel like they wasted their time on me as a patient. So that's what I did.
So when you moved to Pittsburgh, we people that grew up here and call this home, and some of us move away and then come back to Pittsburgh, we understand the special aspect of the city. It's not perfect, but there's some great people here. There's some great schools here. There's some terrific hospitals here and great health care. And so when you moved to Pittsburgh from New Jersey, there had to be a transition. So talk about the transition from New Jersey. I know you're on this regimen of taking care of your liver transplant, but things are going well. So what was your other transition to Pittsburgh? What do you recall about that?
I just recall that, I come here. I don't know a whole lot of people. The people that I do know are all from the medical community. great. Everybody that I knew from the medical community, I liked them all, trusted them all, felt like they had my best interests at heart. I took their advice on everything. I I remember after I moved here, probably about a month or two afterwards, I made an appointment to go and see the doctors to take a look at my liver values and make sure that everything was fine. And by this time, Dr. Starzl has retired from surgery. He is still a presence within the transplant community. He has an office. I even would go and see him in his office. But I want to go and see the doctors and let them tell me that everything is fine. So I did that. I go and I see them, make an appointment one day, and I think I made the appointment for about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. I go there that day. I'm there early in the morning. I'm there, it's middle of the morning now. It's 10:30, 11 o'clock. I'm still there. It's well after 12 o'clock noon. I'm still there. And I think I'm about the last patient. And the doctor comes out. His name is Dr. John Fung. And he has taken over the Thomas E. Starzl Transplant Institute. So he's responsible for all the organ transplantation that's going to be done in Pittsburgh. And he walks up to me, introduces himself, and tells me, I took a look at your blood work. Everything looks fine. You really don't need to come here anymore. And he said, didn't Dr. Starzl give you a pass? You don't need to come to transplant clinic. I said, yes, he did. He said, well, I'm extending that pass. You don't need to come here. If there's a problem, we'll call you and tell you you need to come here. So again, I just felt like I don't really need to worry about my medical health. I'm going to do the things that they tell me to do. If they call me up and tell me I need to come for a checkup, I'll go for a checkup. If they give me a script to go get blood work done, which they've been doing for the last 10 years, they're going to have me go every 2 months and get my blood work done. I'll go and do that. They'll get the results. Again, if there's a problem, they'll call and let me know there's a problem. Otherwise, I just have to get used to living in this new city and get used to my new job and meeting new friends. So that was my outlook.
Interesting.
I didn't think about anything else.
Yeah. So in your life, you're what now, over 70?
I'm over 70, 71 years old.
So when you look back at your life, who would you say are the biggest influences in your life and why?
Okay. It's interesting that you asked that question, because last year in the holiday season, my daughter, who is just turned 24 years old herself, she gave me a book. And it's like, Dad, I want to know your story. So I want to hear about your siblings and your parents and your this and that and, influences on your life and, where you went to school and what you studied and all these various things.
That's great.
So it asked me sort of the same thing. What are the biggest influences on your life? And I would say that the 4 biggest influences on my life are as follows. Influence number 1 was my own parents and my siblings. I grew up with them and my parents set me on what I call the right road. They wanted me to go and get a good education and go to college and all these various things. And, I grew up with my siblings and we went, the family went on vacation or whatever. Christmas came and we got these various and sundry Christmas presents and we'd go and visit, extended family and what have you. But they were the first big influence on my life. Influence number 2, when I lived in Alabama, was this family across the street from us. This family had 2 twin boys who were about 7 years older than me. And these twin boys, as I grew up and got older and older, and even when my family moved to Ohio, they moved also in the state of Alabama because their father was an accountant. And they moved to a town in Alabama called Huntsville, Alabama, northern Alabama, and that's where they have some things associated with the NASA space program. But these 2 twin boys, older than me, became very good friends of mine. And they got me interested in sports, particularly college sports. And they were big fans of the University of Alabama football program. And they got me to be a fan of the University of Alabama program. So for the last 60 years plus, I have been a football fan of the University of Alabama football program.
Well, we've had some good moments.
I've had some great moments. They've had 13 national championship football.
13.
13 since that time. No school has had 13 in these last 60 years, but them. So they were a very big influence upon my life. The third big influence upon my life was my wife and ultimately the children that we had together. And they've been a big influence on my wife. So when I met my wife, it was after I had my liver transplant. It turns out over time, over the years, she would ask me about mine, and in the early days, she would say, well, geez, didn't you go and get some blood work for them? And I would say yes, and she says, well, should you call up and follow up and make sure everything was okay? And I would say to her, no, I don't have to worry about it. They'll call me if there's a problem. And a couple of years after I married her, they called me up and said, we've been noticing some things in your kidney functions. We want you to go see a urologist. I said, fine, I'll go. Made an appointment, went and saw a urologist. And ultimately, they determined that I was having some issues with my kidneys related to my immunosuppressant medication, my cyclosporin. The toxicity from that medication had kind of interrupted and was disturbing my kidney functions. And in the end, they had to remove one of my kidneys because it was so messed up. And I ultimately went on the list to have a kidney transplant. So I had a kidney transplant, give or take 18 years after my liver transplant.
And this is while you were married.
So this is after we've been married for a few years now.
Did you have kids at that time?
Had one.
Okay.
So she was like, well, they don't call. And I said, finally they did call. I said, they said we needed to go see a urologist. I said, see, they do follow up on these blood tests. And if there's a problem, they will tell me. And I said, and the doctors have told me that years ago, because Dr. Fung had told me that if there's a problem, we will tell you that there's a problem and we need to address.
From your blood work.
From my blood work. So I go, I have my kidney transplant, and I'm on new immunosuppressant then. Another brand new medication that they have. Called FK506, also known as Prograf. In generic form, it's known as tacrolimus. And that's the immunosuppressant I'm on now. And have been on since I had my kidney transplant. But I go through life with her, and we have first one and then a second child. And, the first one was, my son was only about a year and a half old when I had my kidney transplant. So my wife and my son would come to the hospital. And I had even though my wife and I were living outside of Washington, D.C. at the time, we came to Pittsburgh to have the kidney transplant because that's where I feel the most self-assured. Mm-hmm. That's where I kind of, in the back of my mind, I know everything is going to be all right.
What doctor did your kidney transplant?
So I ended up, a friend of mine ended up being a living donor and donated a kidney to me. So in the living donor process, you have one doctor takes it out of the donor. That was a Dr. Ron Shapiro at UPMC at the time. He's now in New York. And the doctor that put that kidney into me was a Dr. Scantleberry. I'm not sure where she's practicing medicine now, but she's not at UPMC. But at the time, she was at UPMC. And of course, both of those people, surgeons working in the Transplant Institute, were sort of under the auspices of Dr. Starzl. But Dr. Starzl himself had long retired from surgery, didn't perform surgery anymore, did research. But he was involved, let's just say. I knew that he knew what was going on with me, and he was following every step along the way and keeping track. Because I used to go and see Dr. Starzl in his own office across the street from the Presbyterian Hospital on Fifth Avenue above a pizza shop. That's where his offices were. But I could go and see him. Now, patients didn't go see Dr. Starzl. I could go see Dr. Starzl because of the long relationship I had with him. When they thought about renaming what they had as a transplant institute and attaching his name to it, they had a big ceremony at UPMC. And they invited me to come to that ceremony. So I come to the ceremony, and I bring my wife at the time, and she's pregnant with my son. So the one that was a year and a half years old when I had my kidney transplant. But when they were renaming and putting the name Dr. Thomas E. Starzl on the Transplant Institute, we had come, my wife and I had come, and she's standing there, and we're talking to Dr. Starzl, and he's looking at her and telling her that her son, her child, was going to be just healthy as a horse. There should be she should have no concerns that my transplant experience and my transplant, sickness that led to the transplant would have no effect on this child. This child was going to be perfectly fine. And he assured her that that was the case. And it turns out a year and a half later, when I had my kidney transplant, my son would come and visit me in the hospital, and he'd shriek and yell through the hospital that he was going to see his daddy. So he would get off the elevators and on the floor and come and see me. And that was the same floor where I'd been a patient recovering from my liver transplant. So I knew the people all knew me, everything was fine. A few years later, life goes on. We're married, and my wife and I have another child, a girl this time. Great. Life continues. A few years later, Dr. Starzl passes away. When Dr. Starzl passed away, it absolutely floored me. I had seen him at a Starbucks coffee shop 10 days before he passed away. And he did not look particularly good. But all through the years, I would go and see Dr. Starzl, and sometimes he would look great, and sometimes he didn't really look too good, and you thought, well, maybe he's got a cold or whatever. But a few days later, he would look great. So I had seen him like 10 days before, and he didn't look great, but he didn't look terrible. But he passed away, and when he passed away, my friend Sandy calls me up to tell me that he's passed away.
That had to floor you.
I was floored. I couldn't believe it. For a brief, probably millisecond or two, it was the saddest moment of my life. Like, I couldn't believe that this person who had saved my life was gone. But then I immediately thought of all these times that I had spent with him. I would go to events here or events there, and we'd go to speak at this, and we'd go and speak at that. And he and I were kind of like a team. And I could go months, and sometimes I went a year and a half, maybe didn't see him. But every single moment of my life that I ever spent with him, I treasured. I valued those things. Like, that was significant.
He saved your life.
So he was definitely one of those four entities, if you will, that were the most influential in my life.
Absolutely.
My friends, Bob and Charles Whelan, my parents and my siblings, my wife and my children, and then Dr. Starzl. And those four were the biggest influences on my life.
So you've been given so many blessings of really at a time when transplantation was in the early days where people were not surviving these surgeries. You get to be number 6 on the list of cyclosporine, and you are here 45 years later talking about it. You are such a huge success story for UPMC, for liver transplantation, for Dr. Starzl. I mean, you're a living, walking, breathing success story for all of the great healthcare that's going on really not far from this studio here in Upper St. Clair. And so with that being the case, what the other people in this city that not everybody knows, they're called CORE, the Center for Organ Recovery and Education, an organ procurement agency that goes out and they harvest these organs and bring them to the surgeons in Pittsburgh. And so you do you do some work for them. There's a lot of volunteers that come from transplant patients that work for
Hmm.
CORE because of the gratitude of being here,
Yeah.
and they're trying to get the word out. CORE does organ donation awareness and education,
Hmm.
and some people within them go out and speak into the schools and talk to the kids
Yeah.
about the importance of being an organ donor on your driver's
Hmm.
license, and you're able to give the gift of life to somebody possibly at the end of your life.
Yeah.
So I know you're affiliated with CORE and they have all these other things that they do. What do you do with CORE as a volunteer?
Mostly it's go out and talk to people um, about organ donation and about people have a, particularly years ago, that why am I doing this? Because they're going to die anyway. And most of the early transplant patients did pass away relatively soon after they had their transplant, sometimes right on the table. The doctors would be doing the procedure and the patient dies. They're either too sick to begin with or just, physically not able to go through the whole regimen of the surgery. And, you know, it's a long process. And, they've suppressed your system so much to undergo the surgery and go through the anesthesia that some patients just can't survive it. But I go and try and talk to people about the fact that, A, it does work. I mean, I've had this thing for 45 years on July the 12th. Today is June the 23rd, whatever. So it works. And it's more to let them know that it does work. You're not going to be able to take the thing with you anyway. You can donate and save somebody's life. It may be somebody that you don't even know. It may be somebody that you know now that's sick and you don't even know or understand maybe how sick they are or that this is one way of treating their sickness. And it's basically to encourage people to sign up and be an organ donor.
It's really great, Thomas, because in this country, this is called an opt-in country, which
Yeah.
means for you to be a donor, you must opt in to be a donor, and that's typically driven from the driver's license.
Yeah.
The driver's license, they ask you a question on your driver's license. Do you want to be an organ donor? And it's yes or no. But there's everybody has thoughts about this. People have seen stories about this and they have misconceptions or
Mm-hmm.
true conceptions. So in this country, there's a few states that have over 66% of their residents as or signed up to be organ donors. There's other states that are at the bottom of the list that have less than 33% of their
Mm-hmm.
residents to be organ donors. And it really just drives down to education.
Yeah.
It's education, because the myth is that some people feel like the biggest myth is that if I become an organ donor and they know that about me, they're not going to try to save my life because they can get my organs.
Right.
Well, that's not how it works.
No, that's not at all how it works.
Doctors are here to sign an oath that we're going to do everything possible to save
Yeah.
your life, and that's how it is. But for some reason, this false conspiracy of they're not going to save you is the number one myth why people do not donate, and it's completely false.
Yeah.
It's completely false.
Yeah.
So that's why your work with CORE is so important, because this gets the education out there. And in Pennsylvania, you can sign a box. It's like give a couple dollars when you sign your license to send it to organ donation awareness. So there's billboards and there's speakers that come into schools, and it helps to fund the COREs and the big one in Philadelphia. I don't know what they're called, Gift of Life or something. And that's why what you're doing now is so important.
Yeah.
And it's really just, it's just education. And this is what we're doing here today.
Yeah.
And you're such a success story, and you and your wife are the only living heterosexual that you know of organ donation recipient family, maybe, that anybody even knows of.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Again, sheer luck.
Yeah.
Mine particularly was sheer luck. because at the time of my liver transplant, there was no such thing as an organ procurement agency. There was nothing known. Fortunately, something happened to somebody, they passed away, and they were willing to do this basically without nothing on their driver's license, but they either had made their feelings known prior to, or their family said, yes, we want to do this. We understand that our brother, father, whatever, is going to pass away. And there's nothing we or anybody in the medical community can do to prevent that. But we want his life to be, or hers, to be extended. We want to offer up their organs for anybody that might be in need. And they said, great, thank you very much. And I was one of the people that received one of those organs.
Yeah, it's a remarkable story. And so now today you do some work for CORE. You're sitting in the hospitals and you're at the CORE table trying to sign up organ donors.
Right.
Do you go to visit patients also?
I've seen probably in my life hundreds, if not 1,000 patients. Either patients that are on the cusp, they're waiting, they're hoping to, that a donor is found within the next, few weeks, or patient that, hey, 3 days ago they just had a liver transplant, or they just had, a kidney transplant last month. Whatever the case may be.
Before this show, you shared a story about a woman that and you got a little emotional about it. And I want you to share that story when you were talking to this younger lady about a transplant.
Okay, this is when I still lived in New Jersey. I was in Pittsburgh. I had been to see my transplant coordinator, Sandy, and I'd been to see Dr. Starzl. And Sandy said, I want you to go see this patient up in the hospital. She's here with her mother. I said, okay, tell me a little bit about her, whatever. She says, well, she's in room X. And she tells me about this young woman who had just had a liver transplant. And she said, I think she's a little bit nervous about the whole thing. What is life now going to be like? I've had this shock to my system, medically speaking, in terms of this new organ going in, but what is life going to be like for me? So I went to visit this woman. And so I go up and I meet her, and she's in her young 20s, and I don't believe she was married at the time. She was here recovering, and she was with her mother. And this woman starts telling me, a little bit about herself and, whatever. And I said, oh, well, everything's going to be fine. I said, the thing you have to do is look forward to positive things ahead in your life. Like someday you may want to get married. Someday you may want to have children. And those things hadn't really occurred to this woman at this point in time. I don't know how long she had been sick, but I got the feeling maybe she had been sick for a couple of years. I said, anything is possible. You're being an organ recipient doesn't affect anything else about your body or anything else in your life. You might do like I did. I got out of here and I went to grad school as soon as I left. I said, you could have a child someday. And she looked at me and she kind of shook her head like, I don't know about that. But I told her mother, I said, there's no reason she can't be a mother someday and that you can't be a grandmother. And her mother came over and her mother by this time is crying. I don't know that she had thought about it, but I think probably in the back of her mind, she had thought maybe, gosh, I guess I'll never have grandchildren. I guess she'll never be a mother. I'll never be a grandmother. I don't know if she has other children or not. I didn't get that far along in conversation with her. But she was so overcome with joy, the fact that, hey, this might be possible. Maybe she's never thought about this because she's maybe been sick for a while. So all she's thought about was being sick. No, you're well. You're going to be well. You're going to have a child. So about a few years later, by this time I had moved back to Pittsburgh. I had moved to Pittsburgh from New Jersey. So this woman that I had met probably in the late 80s that had had this transplant, maybe even, it might have even been in the early 90s. I've met her, and I see her at a meeting of an organization called TRIO, Transplant Recipients International Organization. And she remembered me. And she said, "Oh, I got married to him." I said, "Great." She says, "Oh, we're pregnant." I said, "That's great. I told you that anything is possible."
It's a great story, Thomas.
So
I love that.
I said, "Is your mother happy?" She said, "Ever since you told my mother that this could happen, my mother's been on cloud nine."
I love that.
Because my mother, she just thought about me being sick. So
what a great story, and it just, it dawns on me as I'm sitting here listening to you tell me these stories. So you've been through some extraordinary circumstances. You had your life saved in the early 80s with the pioneer, the boss of liver transplantation in this entire world, on a drug that was just experimental that actually helped you sustain your life. So, and then you have a kidney transplant later on. And so when you think back at your life, Thomas, what touches your heart the most? What are the things that have happened to you in your life that really have touched your heart the most?
Well, I think about, the birth of my two children. And when I think about the birth of my two children, that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't had these organ transplants, particularly my liver, because my son was already born once I had when I had the kidney transplant. But neither of them would have been born if I hadn't undergone these procedures. I wouldn't have married my wife. I mean, I'm extremely fortunate that I married my wife. I'm extremely fortunate that I have these two children. They're both extremely healthy. Not an iota of any healthcare concerns with them. I look back and I think how lucky I have been, because there's no difference between me and anybody else walking down the street. It's not like I'm the son of the king of Siam and I got on some kind of privileged track that that this would happen to me, but only because you're the son of the king or whatever. I'm just a regular guy, and a regular guy meets a regular guy in terms of Dr. Sarswell, and magic happens.
It's amazing. So when there's 103,000 people on the organ transplant waiting list, there's countless thousands more that are almost sick enough to be on that list.
Right, probably are, yeah.
What's your message to those people that are basically fighting for their lives and hoping that something like this could happen? What could you say to them?
I would say to them, if you have the least bit of doubt, go see your doctor. Don't think, oh, everything is going to be fine, because that's initially what I thought before my liver transplant. For 3 or 4 months, I was probably sick. I just didn't realize it. But I was I had moved to New Jersey. I was working on Wall Street, having kind of a good time there and just getting used to that life. And I ignored things that I probably should have alerted myself to and gone to see a doctor. And then maybe I would have found out earlier. So I was extremely lucky from that perspective. But I look back and I just think how fortunate it was that I met such and such. How fortunate it was that I met such and such. And how fortunate I was that this donor came into my life at a time that I didn't even know that I needed this donor. But it was very fortuitous that it happened exactly when it happened, for me to have had that person's liver for 45 years and never miss a beat.
Yeah.
And I just tell people, think about positive things. But if there's something health-wise that's going on in your life, go see your doctor and make sure that they assess that whatever it is that's going on isn't something major that needs some kind of a major fix like I had to have.
Yeah. So there's also people that are going to the DMV and they're getting their license for the first time, and they're going to be presented with the question, do you want to be an organ donor? Yes or no? Or people with driver's license and they've made the decision that it was no for whatever reason. So what is your message to them?
I think my message to them is you have to be comfortable in the decision you make, but is there a particular reason why you wouldn't want to be? If you wouldn't want to be because you think they're going to die, the person that might receive an organ from you, or your cornea, in case of a cornea transplant, if you think that they're going to die anyway, well, medicine has come a long way. They're probably not going to die. What's probably going to happen is you're probably going to save that person's life and or certainly improve that person's situation in life by donating, be it any part of your body, an organ, and your, like I say, your corneas or skin, what have you. There's really no reason that I can see for you not to do it. All the major religions of the world say that this is a great thing to do. No religion that have ever been made aware of have said that, oh no, you can't do that because it's against our religious beliefs. And most people's religions say that if you can help your fellow man, you should do whatever you can to help your fellow man. So go with that notion.
Yeah. And, I think healthcare in this city is just, we have some terrific hospitals in this city for babies, for people with serious life-threatening illnesses. But we really have an incredible transplant facilities, and mainly UPMC, but also AGH has a transplant program.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody sends the transplant people here for those reasons, really from all over the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I had heard that, people in Saudi Arabia heard about this and they were coming and they had bought several homes in Greentree because one heard this one, that one, this one, and they're all coming to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
They're all coming to Pittsburgh. So, we are really blessed with some just tremendous healthcare and universities. And the University of Pittsburgh is part of that teaching hospital with UPMC. So what are your thoughts about, I mean, no one's perfect. No person or healthcare facility is perfect. But, they're saving a lot of lives down there. So what are your thoughts about the healthcare you've received from UPMC?
I don't think there's anything that they've done ever that wasn't in my best interest, and there's no problem that they've encountered with me or anybody else that I know of that they couldn't really address. Superior is the only thing I can say with regard to the healthcare here. It's just better than anything I could have ever expected or wished for.
Yeah.
I came knowing absolutely nothing, being the most naive person, medically speaking, in the world. And I still probably am in some respects. I mean, I understand about organ transplantation, and I understand that, getting your blood tests and various kind of testing, but I don't know nearly as much as a lot of other people. And I've really come to realize that it's not my job. The people that get paid and been trained and educated in that area, they know what they're doing. I haven't been trained and educated in that area. I'm not interested in that area. You tell me what to do. You know what I should do. You tell me what to do and I'll do it. And that's kind of my philosophy.
Well, it's such a great story. I'm so glad you could come and share your story with us. I mean, it's just such an inspirational story for someone that's on that waiting list to get an organ transplant, whatever type of organ it is, to be here, sitting here with you as a successful, quality of life guy at 71 years old with a liver transplant that has lasted 45 years and a kidney transplant, did you say 27 years? 27 years. So this is just, you are the success story of the success story, the poster boy of successful transplantation.
Yeah.
And it's I'm so honored that you would come in and spend your time with us, because it's just such a great story.
Yeah.
And that you give back also, and that's even better. That's even better. So Thomas, I just can't thank you enough for coming and sharing your story with us. It's a great inspiration for people that need some inspiration out there.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great. And if you know anybody that has a serious illness and they need a pick-me-up, I mean, tell them about this show. We are on YouTube. You could just put in the search bar Lee Adams, Thomas Burke with an E, B-U-R-K-E,
Yep.
at the Upper St. Clair Access Channel. And you can listen. We've done 2 of these. We've done part 1 and part 2. And you could see our series of what it's like to have a really great, successful transplant story here, and from Squirrel Hill in Pittsburgh. So it's really terrific. And his wife is living with him, and they're both had successful liver transplants. What a blessing that they have. And the last thing I want to leave with you is, if you or your mother or your father or your brother or your sister or your aunt or your uncle need a transplant to save their life, whether it be lung or heart or kidney or liver or pancreas, etc. If you need one to save your life, my question is, will you accept it? Will you accept that gift of life? And I think that the general consensus would say that, like, a very high percentage would say yes, And so, with that being the case, I think in a perfect world, that many people would also be organ donors. But unfortunately, there's all these misconceptions and myths that are out there that make people say no to the question of, do you want to be an organ donor on your driver's license? So please very much consider saying yes to be an organ donor. To give that gift at the end of your life is the best gift you could possibly give. Thomas sits here with 45 years with a liver transplant, 27 years with a kidney transplant. How great is that? But that came from donors. So please have that conversation with your family and say, this is a great idea. The myths are not true. And so I just encourage you to do that. This is a free country. You can do whatever you want, but that's our encouragement. That's our story today.
Yeah.
And this is what we're hoping to really get across. But I thank you all for watching. Please join us for another edition of One on One. I'm your host, Lee Adams. Take care of yourself.